Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University in Adelaide, Australia, and that will become important in a moment. And welcome to Vlog 65, Interdisciplinarity and the PhD. And I'm really excited to be in Paisley in Scotland once more with a very good friend of mine, a great scholar, a great international scholar, Professor David McGillivray, who is the Chair in Event and Digital Cultures still. Is that still the correct title?
That's correct.
At the University of the West of Scotland. How fantastic is the branding, by the way? Loving this stuff. Now, I'm going to go through your qualifications. Correct me if I make a mistake. A BA Honours in Leisure Management from Glasgow, Cali in 1997. Correct?
Could be, yes.
Could be, and get ready for this PhD. I'm hoping I've got this right, in Governing Organisational Wellness from Glasgow, Cali in 2003.
Yep.
Fantastic. We'll get into that PhD shortly. And he's also a Fellow of the Higher Education Academy, which is powerful and demonstrates, I think, your commitment to the sector. David does many things. He has a very broad and diverse and interesting academic career, but he particularly focuses on, I would argue, understanding the significance of sporting and cultural events, with a lot of attention to digitisation and how digitisation creates those alternative renderings of cultural events and sporting events. He's also working on a great project that we might talk about as well, a UK and Canadian collaboration for men and women with impairments and how they manage and enjoy sporting events. So David, I'm thrilled to be back at the university. How are you, superstar?
I'm great, and it's good to have you back. Fantastic.
I'm becoming a regular visitor, I think. And there's lots of questions I want to ask you, and there's been a lot of requests about and for this vlog when my students found out that I would be talking with you. But could you tell us right back about your PhD experience and how perhaps it has transformed your experience and expertise as a supervisor?
Yeah, I think the PhD experience I had was really interesting in the sense that it became extremely interdisciplinary. You said right at the beginning that I did a management program, which I did at the beginning, albeit it was a management program that, because of the colleagues who ran those programs, became much more about social theory and influenced by social scientific narratives about the space of leisure. So in some ways it was like a leisure studies program, which there were many of in the UK at that time, albeit that students were tend to be attracted to the more management aspect. So that's why the course in itself was broadly more leisure studies, whereas the award was a management award. So it was a number of the modules, if you like, within that program that really got me interested in A, doing a PhD, and B, doing one that broadly looked at much more theoretically informed perspectives around about this sort of leisure phenomenon that I was studying at the time. So when I started a PhD, again, it was more likely to be in the management terrain, but it emerged out of a kind of concern with workplace recreation programs. So that's what the initial interest in the PhD was, in terms of, industrialists used to provide lots of workplace recreation opportunities for their staff. As part of in New Lanark here in Scotland, Robert Owen did that, Cadbury's and other organisations did that. So I approached it firstly, that was the topic that was advertised, and that's what I applied for. But as the PhD developed, and this is where I have the particular interest in interdisciplinary work, and actually the kind of strengths of it, but also the weaknesses for the student of being involved in that process. Because as it developed, it didn't at its origins have a kind of theoretical base that I could locate myself within. So when you're in that position as a PhD student, you progress on, you read lots of literature, there's lots of interesting work out there, you start to develop. But there was a period as I got through, probably after about a year of my PhD, where I was myself concerned that there wasn't a clear theoretical underpinning that I could attach to this work that was going to see me through it. Because again, you're experiencing people who worked in very clear discipline areas, who would ask you at conferences, would ask you within the university, so what's your discipline? Where do you come from? What's the theoretical base for your work? And you're kind of going, that's a good point actually about how I would articulate that. I've been reading quite a lot of kind of work of Michel Foucault at that time, and for its areas or tangential areas to the PhD, and was becoming increasingly kind of interested in those lots of bodies of work around about kind of the leisure body, the working body,
The
that I
disciplined
felt
body.
was that was relevant to what I was doing, but wasn't core to what I had been doing.
Yes.
And at that point, I began to have discussions with supervisors and say, well, perhaps really this is where I would like to take this work, to attach sort of kind of Foucauldian framework around about this work, and to look at this kind of notions of governing and governmentality around about the body and organisations. So that, for me, gave me real clarity, but it was about something that could give me security as well. So being non-discipline specific, if you like, it can be really insecure, I think, for lots of students. So at one point you have this notion of kind of it being liberating, not to be attached to a particular discipline and to be constrained by the kind of boundaries of that discipline.
Yeah.
But other points you feel kind of slightly isolated and lost, perhaps, as if you're in between things. Now as an academic, I might see that as being a real advantage, but when you're a pretty early PhD student, you probably find that the questions at conferences, the discussions with others who are in discipline areas, to be slightly concerning. So I guess and again I think it's important for PhD students here, as I became much more empowered as a PhD student to say, you know what, this is the direction I wish to take, and I need new supervisors or additional supervisors to help me in that process. So PhD students out there watching this will be probably aware of situations where they feel anxious or uncertain about the direction of their work, and whether perhaps where they're being encouraged or directed towards is the right path for them.
Yes.
And so I would feel now fortunate that I took that decision, and actually within our institution had someone who was very well versed in Foucauldian theory, but especially around about the body and organisations, who came onto my team and really completely transformed the process for me, because it was then a debate that was absolutely theoretically informed, but it was still interdisciplinary, but I had a grounding and a security and something to sort of hold on to that actually then has led to being something very proactive for me in my academic career since. And I think the key advice is that you do, if you're in that space of doubt and you have some worries, then you do need to grasp that opportunity, because a PhD actually ultimately is defended on the basis of some of those theoretical debates that are underpinning for your work, that it's seen throughout the thesis, that it relates to methodology, that ontology and epistemology and methodology, and that they link together in some way, and you can defend that. And you can defend that as an approach, and at the initial stages of my PhD I wouldn't have been able to do that. I felt unprepared to be able to do that, and so actually out of fear came that driving force and motivation to say, right, I need to be immersed in a space here. Wow. And so that I guess for me is it's important for a number of ways, but I think as a interdisciplinarity has now become kind of very common and very kind of normal for people to do that work. I still think the same issues are there about people feeling potentially a lack of security to something that they can say, well, I'm immersed in this terrain, and whereas on the other hand, because disciplines can be quite constrained by boundaries, actually being just outside or on the margins or on the periphery there can be really great when you go to conferences and otherwise, because you're able to potentially advance elements or on the edges of a paradigm that actually can create new research opportunities.
And new knowledge. I'm going to push you a little bit on that too, in terms of you as a supervisor now. When students are expressing the same fears that you've articulated there, do you say it'll be fine, take the time, water finds its own level? How has that impacted on your experience as an interdisciplinary supervisor?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the nature of the disciplines for me seems less important than a particular theoretical terrain that people are occupying. So I do say to my doctoral students that I think, and it's not necessarily just about saying I think you should occupy this terrain, but it is about in that early stage of saying, well, I think we need to explore a terrain that you can occupy, that you feel comfortable with, that gives you a body of work, a body of theory that you can explore, that you can critique and otherwise, but that is there for you to build your thesis around. Because I think for going forward in an academic career, I think it is really useful for you to be able to have expertise in a particular body of work, theory or otherwise, that then you're able to adapt to particular context, environments, and that's what I've done. So I've used the Foucauldian approach to a number of different areas. So some of that around about the body, post-PhD, but then into the work that you've just talked about with events, where we look at kind of disciplinary spaces around about events, so the kind of live sites and events that we see commonly around the world now around about big events. So the kind of Munich fan parks, the fan miles in Berlin, these acting as kind of disciplinary spaces became a part of that. So the theoretical work carries on, and then you potentially also get into other kind of post-structural kind of theorists and otherwise, like Deleuze and Guattari, etc., and think about their work and how the relevance of their work. So I think that for me wouldn't have been possible had I not moved into that terrain at a certain point early on in the PhD.
Fascinating. And can I say, you can also see his ability to be malleable and move. I have no idea what that sound was, had no impact on David at all. He kept powering through. Should I be worried about that sound, David?
No, that was an alarm test.
Of course it was. How exciting. Didn't impact on you because you do interdisciplinary work. So let's get into this now. So interdisciplinarity is a radical and important topic in international higher education, but it is relatively difficult to manage in an REF, RAE, and also ERA environment in Australia. So how do you define interdisciplinarity now, and how do you believe it operates in our higher education landscape, David?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah,
I mean, I think there are lots of different discussions at the moment about interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity.
Trans.
Some are about how universities operate and are thinking about research excellence environment. So some of them are thought about quite instrumentally, I think. So, for example, working with another school in a university environment might be viewed as interdisciplinary on the basis of, depending on if that's a science school and I'm doing work in a media school, then we will both be able to count our articles and submit them to different units of assessment. And there's interdisciplinarity at work. Others might not see that as being sufficient enough to describe it as interdisciplinary. And I think so there it may be administrative as much as it is about a sociologist working with a particular scientist.
Yeah.
But I think in the UK system, definitely in grant bidding processes now, the funding bodies are now much more aware of the need for disciplines to come together. Now, if you're not actually ever connected to a discipline, I think interdisciplinarity is quite an interesting term, because if you didn't grow up or were trained or came through a programme of learning that could describe itself as a discipline.
So
there's a lot of debate about what is a discipline. If you're an economist,
an occupational therapist,
so you have subjects, you have fields. People use the term. I think people continue to use the term discipline when perhaps many of those working within that sphere are not actually in a discipline that maybe others would identify as a discipline. They're in a field, they're in a particular subject area, and I don't think it necessarily matters there, because I think in terms of the sort of assessment of research quality, it's about the quality of so there was a problem. There's a research problem that we're isolating, and the fact that we have somebody who's a sociologist working with someone who works in the educational sphere and someone who's a computer scientist working together to deal with that problem for a broader social impact, or to deal with a particular social ill, I don't think it's really that problematic. I think it's often universities that are concerned with pigeonholing people and putting them in particular spaces to say, oh, so you're in that area of activity. When actually, no, my theoretical, the way that I'm approaching this theoretically may well be really valuable to thinking about this technology problem, because I'm coming from a social scientific perspective. And I think we need to understand the ethics, the broader impacts of these things. So, again, I personally think interdisciplinarity in a way becomes slightly problematic as a term, because it seems to require that you are connected to a discipline. And many scholars that I experience now couldn't really describe themselves as being part of a kind of discipline, especially what historically disciplines were understood as.
And we were trained as an historian, we were trained as a sociologist. That stuff really is gone, I think.
Well, yeah, I think so. I think some may wish to keep it and maintain it.
And why would you do that?
For reasons of maybe security, but also being part of a particular group, and maybe even protecting themselves in the future for being associated with that. This is my point about the uncertainty of being, if you like, interdisciplinary or outside of a discipline. That uncertainty is there. I personally think it drives me to say, well, actually, okay, so I feel anxious about not being part of that, because that means I don't have a certain body of knowledge that I occupy, or a particular terrain that I occupy. But actually, when you look at it, I think it's often those that work within disciplines that wish to sort of project that on others and say, by the way, well, you don't have that grounding there. And actually, well, maybe that grounding is limiting your foresight or way of thinking about a particular problem. And I think, I find that you find others who you work with who recognise where people can make a contribution and add value to a particular research project or otherwise. And actually, wiping away this notion of discipline can really be helpful as you sit down to deal with that particular research problem that you have.
See, isn't this inspiring? I knew it would be inspiring. I'm getting terribly excited by what you're saying. What I'm also interested in, I've known you a while, and obviously I've read your work for a decade, is what I find interesting is the discussion of theory and the importance of locating yourself in theory. I didn't think we'd go there as much as we have today. Very interesting.
Well, I mean, I think, again, go back to uncertainty, I think there is a point where actually, when you do any kind of research, actually, being able to, I mentioned like an ontological, epistemological, methodological relationship that I think for a PhD student is to just know of that without going to the lowest common denominator of a textbook that shows it as an onion or shows it as whatever. It may show you as. Those relationships, understanding those relationships are really important. So I once did a piece for a critical management studies thing out of my PhD, so I was doing this work on kind of governing bodies and organisations, and I went to a critical management conference, and then I did a paper from the conference, and one of the kind of key questions that came back from the reviewers, so I got a review, as many of the students and others watching will get, was, okay, I wanted to be more explicit what the epistemological commitments are and how those translate through the work. And I'm thinking, well, that's an interesting question, I'll have to really think about that. And essentially it was okay, so Foucault is broadly the theoretical landscape you've been occupying here. What kind of epistemological commitments are there within his work that you are drawing upon, and what influences what you say? And I thought, that's a really great question, and it challenged me. And I think a lot of PhD students are not really, when I read their thesis and when I look at the work, they're not really dealing with those big issues about what exists and what the limits of knowledge are and how that might relate to methodologies. Doesn't mean to say that it has to be linear, but there has to be an understanding of what each is, so that you can make an informed decision on how you're approaching a particular method and methodology, and it being able to make a case as to why that was relevant.
So, for example, managing the anti-statism of Foucault. So when you're doing governmentality, understanding the consequences to regulation of that anti-statism. So that's a very interesting sort of war position in itself.
The other thing about theory is that it's not always helpful at the time, or it can be extremely confusing, it can be really challenging, but working through that is actually a significant part of the PhD for future academic engagement, because PhD students who are watching and others, you will publish beyond your PhD, and you will, that theoretical frame or otherwise or frames, if it's more than that you adopt, will be really important for how you think through, and you'll be trying to publish in particular areas, and you'll get those sort of questions about that theoretical landscape and why that's a particularly appropriate one or otherwise, or critiques of that approach. And if you've not immersed yourself within that and used the PhD as a stage where you can really get that crit from supervisors, from conference presentations, and ultimately at a Viva, and or when you submit your thesis for those in Australia and other systems, then I think it's a lost opportunity, actually.
Fantastic. Okay, now are you ready to get grunty? Because the next question is the grunty one. Come on. Now, what I'm calling, because I'm being naughty today, the former interdisciplinary paradigm. So leisure studies, media studies, and cultural studies, I have argued that they've lost their edge and they've lost their energy. So Steve and I took on the professorial title of cultural studies as a rhetorical flourish, as a statement back for a paradigm that I think is dying, and in Australia it's a mess. I think internationally it's almost becoming an embarrassment, cultural studies, to be frank with you. Media studies has its own problems. Leisure studies is one of your great passions, and I love it as well. But I would argue they are dying. Probably being naughty there, but why are they dying, or why are they losing their edge?
Well, I'll only really talk about leisure studies just because that's, I guess, where I, if you like, grew up, and I use that term carefully. But that's where I was immersed in it, and I guess in the area where I'd done my undergraduate degree, leisure studies, at least there was some critical scholars in there drawing from other disciplines, and clearly that's the nature of these studies areas. They were drawing from other disciplines, whether that's geography or that's political science, sociology, psychology or social psychology, and they were addressing this context of leisure, and this free time activity and commercial leisure and others, and offering a critique of that. I think what I find is that all of these, so the areas that I'm interested in, for example, the digital space, leisure studies is in some respects now engaging with that terrain in a way that it probably didn't before, and actually that's, I think, gives us an opportunity to actually reinvent itself to some extent, and a number of colleagues and contemporaries are trying to do that. But the other problem is that they are considering the digital leisure environment. You have platform studies, you have algorithm studies, you have a variety of other discipline or fields that are addressing those issues. That means that it's not in any way just something about leisure studies that can be its terrain. So I think there's potentially a challenge there, just in terms of there's other groups and other sub-disciplines or fields that have emerged to address these problems. That means that leisure studies isn't really relevant, or particularly relevant. There isn't the same, people have affiliations to these other areas is for many maybe more appropriate than being associated with something like a leisure studies community.
Yes.
So it can be really quite amorphous, can't it? It can be hard to say, is there something sufficiently coherent to it that mean you would affiliate? I think
that's render it meaningful.
And what is the body of theory that knowledge that leisure studies covers that other areas don't cover now? I think that's also another issue. But I still think that there are, like say Steve and yourself and others who are looking at a digital leisure space and coming to that with a particular theoretical trajectory or a range of theoretical trajectories to address this modern problem, the digital leisure space, if you like, and the surveillance of self-tracking or or social materialist analysis of
speed.
Exactly, of speed or acceleration. And I think there is a space there, but whether that's under just the terrain of leisure studies as this big thing, I'm not sure that there is really a great future for that. I think you have much more nuanced and specific areas that can develop to deal with that. So maybe a digital leisure studies that's a particular offshoot that actually is got more in common probably with, as I said, platform studies and studies of computer science and looking at algorithms. But I think so people, I don't have a problem that people affiliate and go to other places to find that engagement and connection.
Yes.
And I think, as I said, although I would still affiliate with leisure studies, it's not something that would really find me. I find it problematic if it didn't exist in terms of being able to practice what I practice, because I think that you can do that anyway without those affiliations nowadays.
So I think you might have worked out my next question, which is a whole series of really fascinating new paradigms are emerging, like physical cultural studies, digital leisure studies, but also, and I'm going to go there, deviant leisure, extreme anthropology, Brexit criminology, which looks a really fascinating area, and Trump studies. Steve, Sunny and I are writing a piece on Trump studies as we speak. I'm actually drafting it tonight. So these areas are really, I think, edgy, interesting, provocative, and not coming from the Russell Group, not coming from the Group of Eight, coming from non-standard universities as well. So what do you think is creating these sorts of interdisciplinary new intellectual movements?
Well, for me, we had a little discussion earlier about how kind of occupy social media, and you kind of use social media to connect with academics in all different parts of the world. And I think you come across new configurations or groups or clusters that are forming, and you think, that's really exciting, because it might be theoretically they're approaching it from a particular angle. It might be methodologically the way that the research has been conducted is going beyond what disciplines would accept, or how slow some disciplines might move. And so you have those interests. You might think, well, actually the way that they're looking at research, it might be that it's co-produced research, it's co-designed research, it's participant-led research, or whatever, and that is of interest. And I think so that's another way, and it may be actually just about the kind of the mode of operation of those groups, and the ability to actually create new groups more easily now than was ever possible before, just with a group of academics that come together that all are part of one Twitter list. And I think one of the things it's challenging and difficult for PhD students and colleagues is where do you publish on that stuff? So you may publish, people who are part of those groups that you mentioned may publish in a range of different fields, publications and otherwise, but they may broadly affiliate and understand each other's development on a particular subject, the ones that you've described. So I think academia is actually so fluid at the moment that you can be in and out of affiliations. I go to that, I participate in that. I'm not a member of anything in terms of an association. I think that's the thing that's changed for me. I'm not a member of associations. I go in and out of different fields. The problem for that then comes when it comes to exercises like research excellence frameworks, where you have to pin yourself to something.
And
say,
be
I'm there. This is
panel.
who I am.
I'm going to this panel. I'm being assessed by this group.
Exactly, and that's I think where academia, in terms of the process and practice, is some way a little bit behind the way that people are actually practicing academia at the moment.
And I wonder if I can push you, and indeed push myself on this as well, with stuff like Brexit and Trump and these really complicated political spaces involving xenophobia and all sorts of really complicated issues. I wonder if the disciplines can provide an answer to, why Donald Trump? So what would leisure studies say about that? Do we need Trump studies to gather all these anti-disciplinary frameworks and bring them together?
I think that's probably that. Now you've foxed me, you see. So there's the question I can't answer that Tara can answer. So let's push it back on Tara.
But I just wonder, because I particularly think with Brexit and Trump, because when it happened, I mean, I remember you and I obviously were watching the Facebook feed when Brexit happened. I remember you and I conversed about that, and it was just so stunning. It was like, why has this happened? And there's no real answer there. So as a scholar, what do we do with something that seems so stunning, where people don't even act in their own best interests?
I think it's very difficult with some of these sort of global problems and issues about where a particular academic environment, a particular discipline, a particular field can really come together to deal with that, because they almost seem beyond us in terms of what we have at our hands to be able to do it. So I don't. That's one where I don't really have an answer. It's too big a question for me to have.
But it is not.
With my small and limited ability to think beyond those issues.
But can I also say it's probably a post-empirical space as well. Not only post-empiricist, it's probably post-empirical and certainly post-positivist. I don't think it's got to be evidence-driven, but I think we need to get the theory right before we know what evidence we need.
Yeah, and I mean, my interest in the digital space, I think there is, whether it's Trump or some of these other movements, I think there is a lot of work that does need to be done on how people are occupying these digital spaces to communicate these. I'm not going to use the term fake news, although I've just used it. There's sort of media dimension to that, political dimension to that clearly, and lots of other disciplines can deal with that. And I think there's some quite exciting work that's being done that looks at how people, so Trump clearly has used digital spaces very proactively, very intentionally, very well in terms of how he's been able to occupy that space. So who addresses that? Who looks at that particular, his way of doing so? Well, journalists do, and those that are interested in media studies do. Those are interested in political science do, because they're interested in those kind of processes. So finding, we've got a number of PhD students, for example, that are looking at kind of digital activism in different parts of the world, where we have people who are interested in social media and digital media and some of the affordances of there, working with political scientists who are interested in democratic processes and deliberative democracy, and what role does the digital play within that. So these are the exciting opportunities for students and PhD students coming through to deal with some of these difficult problems. I think that's one of the ways to pull together, and then back to interdisciplinarity in a sense, is that you can pull together interesting projects. One of the things that we find in our institution is that previously that was very difficult to do, because perhaps, again, disciplines would submit a PhD studentship opportunity and someone would apply and they're in a particular discipline. And having to deal with, so I as a supervisor have to deal with interdisciplinarity within teams, within supervision teams. And that's another issue that I think is, for the student is really interesting, but also for the colleagues is really interesting, about someone who is coming from political science background and has been interested in deliberative democracy, interacting with someone who may be interested in the democratic possibilities of social media, and scepticism on one hand, but opportunities on the other, developing relationships, understanding where people are coming from, both theoretically and otherwise. That, for the student, can be really exciting, because there is a study that crosses over, but it can also be, there's a tension sometimes within there, and I think it's always good to recognise that there can be those tensions in there, because in academia there are tensions, clearly, across fields, disciplines, subjects, and that when you wrestle with that and you're open to those ideas, it can be great, but if you close down on that basis, then the student can be the one that potentially suffers within that circumstance.
And again, last question. I think this has become my favourite blog of all the vlogs I've recorded, I've learnt so much, and I feel really inspired and energised to think about knowledge in a new way. So thank you for this. But the final question is, for the PhD students watching this and thinking about working in and with interdisciplinarity, how would that impact on their employability and their academic future?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I am, as I said maybe earlier, I think there's a lot of positive aspects to being interdisciplinary, or at least working interdisciplinary. I think there are also some weaknesses in being interdisciplinary, if you like, i.e. a student that has influences from a number of disciplines but can't locate themselves somewhere. Because I think so the first point is that being able to work across disciplines with other scholars is now very current in the UK system. I think overseas so that is worth a lot. So if you are able to do that and show evidence of that, then your job prospects and your employability. Also, I am a computer scientist, and I am actually working with people who work in dementia studies yes, wonderful opportunities, but the key feature of those people is that they probably are still located at least discipline or field specific in terms of what they first bring to the job. Yeah. So I think there are still some challenges in getting employment when someone says, okay, so what's your background? Well, it's a bit of this, also a bit of that, and a bit of that. I'm a PhD looked across those areas. Then it can be hard to locate yourself. So I think increasingly departments, schools, faculties will have a desire to have people who do that, but that doesn't always mean to say that they are just ready to appoint said person into that role. So I work in a school, Media Culture Society. I am probably Media Culture and Society.
You are.
Right, as a role.
You are.
But in my school and in the environment that we have people who are social scientists. I'm a psychologist, or I'm in the arts and humanities background, so there are maybe particular practitioners or arts practitioners or art lecturers. So the school is very interdisciplinary, but they are probably still very tied to certain disciplines. So I am able to kind of go across those areas, and that can be really advantageous at some points. But in others, sense of belonging is an important element for academics, I think. So sometimes you don't feel you absolutely belong in one place or the other.
Yeah, and also I suppose don't universities hire too? They need somebody to teach these 3 courses.
Yeah, so the secret to where job prospects may be are those departments, faculties, or schools, or whatever the administrative arrangement is, that have programs that are interdisciplinary. Because then actually you really do need people who can go across those areas of activity and not be restricted and because in some ways as academics we can restrict our students' possibilities by being only located in one space and say, well, that's all I do. And so we have applications for doctoral students now. Many of our studentship projects that go out there are deliberately interdisciplinary. We are looking to address a particular problem, a societal problem or otherwise, and actually in order to do so we do need people that have very different sort of skill sets to be able to do that. And that probably will lead to some of the changes if that follows through into the way that academic departments and schools work. But as I said, just maybe for me to final is that it's not always comfortable, I don't think, being interdisciplinary or without discipline actually, not just interdisciplinary, but being outside of a discipline that gives you particular, sort of codes of conduct, behaviours, bodies of knowledge, ways of working, types of conferences that they run. All of that in some ways can be quite comforting in the sense of belonging, but if you're going to really change things and be a bit more radical about how academics work to deal with social problems, then actually you do really need to get those people who are outside of there to come together.
What an absolute pleasure. David, you're a legend. It was worth coming all the way to Paisley to see you for this conversation. You're a great colleague, you're a great scholar, you're a great friend. You are leading the way in which we think about this new disciplinary landscape. So thank you for everything that you do. It makes a real difference. And saying to all the wonderful people out there, wasn't that amazing? And as always, I wish you love, light and peace. David and Tara, out.
Thank you.